मित्रों, मैं सबसे पहले तो आज सबको एक बात कहना चाहता हूं। मैं पहले कभी बहुत गोवा नहीं आया, मगर जब पार्टी अध्यक्ष बना तब गोवा आने का, बार बार आने का मौका मिला। संगठन के काम से, सरकार के काम से, चुनावों के अंदर। और जब ऊपर से गोवा को देखते हैं तो महान परशुराम भगवान ने बनाया हुआ क्षेत्र बिल्कुल ऐसे दिखता है जैसे मां भारती के कपाल पर बिंदिया लगी हो। इतना खूबसूरत प्रदेश है।
चिखल पळय केला कालयता त्या आदारान सगळें म्हाका गावता. म्हणजे होच देव म्हणून मानता हांव. बाकीच्यांक पडना उपासता, लोकां वयची तो देव खंयचो अहो म्हणून म्हणना. देव कोणूय करचे, खंयचोय करा, फातर कर आनी कितें कर, मातीच व्हडली म्हणून म्हाका दिसता. आनी खरी व्हडलीच दिसता ती.
तुमच्या भुरग्यापणाचे आमकां कितें तरी सांगा न्ही मातशें. म्हणजे कशें आसलें तुमचें भुरगेपणां?
भुरगेपण बरें आसलें. म्हणटकीर कामाक वयपाचें, ते दर्यान वयपाचें, पॉयंत परशोवपाचें, मिरचावपाचें, वांयगण करपाचें, शेत तें रोवपाचें. हें खूब करताले नोकरी कितें भोंवताले म्हणटा मागीर भुरग्यापणान. जुन्या धांवले उदकान नाले. खेळ्ळो बिळ्ळो म्हणटा बरें, मागीर तेच प्रमाणे खेळोंक जायना. थोड्याच आपणाक जाता तितको खेळोंक, चड खेळ्ळो आडो पडटलो. मागीर फुटबॉलान बीन खूब खेळ्ळा हांव. आतांता खेळटा, भुरगे म्हाका आपयता. सकाळीं म्हणटा 7 उठून आमी गेले काम कितें लाठीचें उदीक काडलें. मागीर घुडवो म्हूण करताले तेजें काडलें. मागीर तें येयलो पेज जेवलो. मागीर कामाक गेलो. कोणागेर गावता थंय गेलो. जाल्यार कितें आसा पळय तें आपणाचें काम केलें शेतांचें. हें करून आमी मागीर ते 12 सुमार परशोवंक गेले. तें हाडलें नुस्तें. कोणाचे आंब्याचे तोर काडले तें हाडलें. अशें करताले. तोरच काडटाले हांव. कांय आनी कांयच कळप ना. एक तोर घेवन येवप. परशून येयले, उडयलें नुस्तें घरा कडेन मातशें न्हिदलें. तें हुमण जाता म्हणसर उठले, जेवले बिवले. 2:30 सकयल गेले खणपाक. सगळें शेत हातीन खणटालो. सगळें खणलें, उडयलें. मागीर पावसान तें जोत धरपाचें, तें नांगरपाचें. सुकें हें आहा गिमान खणपाचें तें हातीन खणटालें. म्हाका चडशें शेताचेंच काम आवडलें आनी थंय तुला.
Khazan system comprises of two parts: a water bodies which are differently placed, and the land portion. So typically, if we consider that this is the Khazans of Merce's Murda village, that part which you can see the structures are the settlement areas where the farmers lived. So farmers lived there, and you can see that portion, that mangroves line which is there, that was the bund which is partly breached there. You can see the water. So as a child I would walk down, and all my community farmers would walk down from here, and these mangroves that you see are the fields of the farmers which are inundated now, and this is the point. So these are low-lying lands with an external tributary or a stream coming from the river into these low-lying lands. So these are all lands below sea level. Now if a community plans to make this land productive, because these are basically below sea level land and inundated. So if a community thinks I need to make these lands productive because I need to sustain, I need food, I need water, and these are my basic needs at that point of time, when people actually transitioned from food gathering or from the forest to food growing. So these were the periods thousands of years back. So simply this logic came to their mind that if I embank the outer water body, maybe this inundation will drain out and then I will have land. And these are alluvial soils, so they are very fertile in terms of agriculture. So with all these in mind, these lands were drained with the embankment of a bund, which we in English know as a dike. Now with the dike, the inundation was controlled. So there was ingress, the ingress of saline water was controlled. Now there was also internally rain water or storm water which had to be drained. So because of which a component of sluice gate was introduced into this dike. So the sluice gates regulated the internal water draining as well as external water entering. So this is the second component. So we have the bund, we have the sluice gate, which we locally call as manos. Now if we have the sluice gate, we also needed an internal water body, because through that internal channel of that water body, the water from the internal part of the land had to get collected, and then through the sluice gate it had to drain out. So therefore we had an internal water body, which is locally called as point. So therefore now we have four components. We have the external water body, which is the tributary or the river. We have the bund, we have the sluice gate, and we have the internal water body. So these becomes the basic components, and now the rest of the components became the cultivable or the productive land. Now this productive land were terraced at different levels. The lowest level usually were either fish breeding places, because they were waterlogged, and or salt making places. That was the one crop from there. A slightly higher elevated land or contoured land would be cultivable fields, maybe a slightly higher again another level of cultivable fields, and then settlements where people lived. So these were the communities who lived there, and they got out of their houses and came to work here for their food production. So these are basic components, how the systems evolved over the years, and these were all evolving due to their experiential learning. So maybe they built the bund in some bad way, they corrected themselves. Maybe they built the sluice gate in a bad way, they corrected themselves. Today what we have is that evolved learning of theirs as a Khazan ecosystem.
माझे जे पूर्वज असले त्या पूर्वजांनी ही मानस हांगा पयलीं घडयल्ली आहा. जेन्ना भायर दर्यो भरता तेन्ना हे मानशेक दारां पळय जी आहा न्हू ती दारां बंद जाता आनी जेन्ना उदक सुकता म्हणजे लो टायड येता तेन्ना हे दर्याचें उदक सकयल गेल्या कारणान जे पळय खाजनांनी वयर पोंत आमचें जें उदक आसता तें लो टायड जाल्या उपरांत ही दारां जी मानशेची आहा ती ओपन जाता आनी उदक भायर वयता. दिसाचें जें पळय नुस्तें कितें आसा तें दिसाच्या टायमार भायर येयना. जेन्ना मातसो काळोख जाल्या उपरांत हांगा जाळ लावपाक मेळटा. तें जाळ हांगा फिशींग नॅट आहा तें हांगा धरल्या उपरांत हमोरीच्या टायमाक जेन्ना उदक भायर वयता लो टायड आसता तेन्ना त्या टायमाक हांगा नुस्तें पडटा जाळाक. मागीर थोड्या वेळान भरती येयल्या उपरांत परत आसली तशी मानस बंद जाता. ही मानस जी आहा ती हांगा शेतकार आहा तेंची मानस आहा आनी हांगा 120 किंवा 130 अशे शेतकार आहा. ते शेतकार ही मानस पयलीं सुद्दां हांगा चलोवन येयल्ले आहा आनी हो जो बांद आहा तो बांद ते सगळे शेतकार पळयता. ती शेताची कमिटी आहा ती कमिटी सगळी हेजी पाहणी करून पळोवपाचें काम ते शेतकाऱ्यांचें आहा आनी ती कमिटी काडिल्ल्या ती देखरेख करता. बांदाक केन्ना असो मदीं होल पडलो आमी भोम तेका म्हणटा तो भोम पडलो जाल्यार तो भोम काडटलो जाल्यार कमीत ते 1-2-3 मिटर डीप खणचें पडटा. मदीं जे बांदाचो सेंटर आसता ते मदीं फोडून म्हणजे 1-2-3 मिटर लांबी आनी 2-3 मिटर डीप इतलो फोडचो पडटा. तो फोडून तो पयलींचो जो चिकोल तितून माती आसता ती काडून भायर उडोवन वयर सायडीक दवरून न्यू तेजेर फ्रेश चिकोल घालचो पडटा आनी तो पुरोवचो पडटा. ही जी मानस आहा ती मानस शेतकारांची जाली सुद्दां जाल्यार तिजी आमी हांगा पावणी करता. पावणी जाल्या उपरांत आमची अशें आहा की ते शेतकारान तो कोण एक मनीस आहा तेकाच दिवची, कित्याक भायल्यांक कोणाकूय दिली नाल्यार ती पिड्ड्यार करता. ही मानस आसल्या कारणान भितर आमची एक पोय म्हणटा तेका आमी ती आहा. तितून नुस्तें पिकता. नुस्तें पिकल्या उपरांत ते जंय कोणाक मानस दिल्ली आसता तो तें नुस्तें विकता, जाळ धरता, विकता आनी तेजेर कितें तरी कमयता आनी आमी ती मानस तेकाय तशी अमक्याच एमावंटाक दिल्लेली आसता. ती तेका एक फावट अशी आतां लॉसानूय वयता आनी फायद्यानूय आसता. पूण तितले व्हडलोसो तेका फायदो असो आसना तरी आसतना तो कितें आपलें शेत आसता म्हणून ते काम करून ते जाता तितली तगोवन धरपाचें करता. आनी जे मानशेचे जे पयशे आसता ते आमी बांदांक यूज करता. खंयसर बोंब पडलो किंवा खावटे पडले कितें काम आसा तेन्ना ते आमी पयशे थंय यूज करता. शेतकाराचें जें कितें मेळटा मानशेचेर तेजेरूच ते काम करता आमी. ही शेतां सुद्दां रोवपाक हांगा खूब त्रास जाता. जेन्ना हायटायड येता किंवा वयलें उदक सोडटा, धरणांचें उदक सोडटा किंवा भायलें उदक चड येयल्या कारणान एक फावट तो बांद असो भरोन फूल वत्ता. बांद फूल वतल्या उपरांत कितें शेतां बितां सगळीं पिड्ड्यार जाता आनी त्या टायमाक खूब अशे त्रास जाता हांगा. तरी आसतना लोक फाटीं फुडें पळयनासतना ते काम करता आनी एकदांचें कशें तरी ते सावरून घेता. जर तर हे बांद नासले जाल्यार म्हाका दिसना ही खाजनां आमी रोवंक पावतले अशें म्हणून ते आमकां केन्ना रोवपाकूय मेळचें नासलें आनी तेजेर पोटूय भरपाक मेळचें नासलें. हे बांद आमी पुर्वजांनी आमच्या पयलींच्या जाणट्यांनी सगळे तेंकोन धरल्या, तशेंच काम करून करून तेंच्यांनी ते धरल्या. ते आतां फाटल्यान थोडी पिळगी आहा ती चलयता ते काम करता. तेका लागून ही आमकां खाजनां रोवपाक मेळटा. जर तर तो बांदांक कितें प्रॉब्लम जालो जाल्यार त्या बांदांक आमकां खंयच्याच शेतकाऱ्यांक शेत न्हू कितेंच रोवपाक मेळपाचें ना.
ह्या शेतान म्हाका 20-25 वर्सां जालीं. हितून येता आतां न्हू 25 वर्सां आसता. शेत नासलें म्हाका. हें लोकांनी दिलां व्हरोन आपूण. हें कोणाक दिल्लें पिकां नासलें तेवलें. ती आमकां कितें आनी कांय नासलें न्हू. कामाक गेलो कोणागेर जाल्यार त्रास करताले. 1-2 वरां दवरताले. हें अशें कर तशें कर तें करचे भाशेक आपूण केल्लें करून खाताले आमी. तें केलें, रोंपे लायले, कांदे लायले, मिरसांग तयार केली, कितें काळंगां घातली जाल्यार खावपाक जाता मरे. आनी तितल्यान सोबीत आसा तें विकूंक जाय. नुस्तें घेवं येता, कितेंय करूं येता. तितून आमी हें कितें करून जगताले. कपडो बिडो घेवंक गावना. तुका बरें करतलो भांगर करतलो हें करतलो तें ना हेंच तूं पोटो भरपाचें जानेरान खणटा जानेवारीच्या म्हयन्यान मागीर खणलें म्हणटकूच तें तापता न्हू तापलें म्हणटकूच मागीर ती मेरो घालच्यो पडटा ताका मेरो घातल्यो मागीर 5 फूट रोव मारचो पडटा बी आतां कर्जतूच घालता पयलीं जया घालतालो तें व्हडलें म्हण तांबड्या मुनाचें घालतालो हें सगळें सोडल्यान कर्जतूच घालता 5 वर्सां पिकताय बरें रोव मारलो म्हणटूच ताका उदीक पळोवपाक जाय मेन उदीक खंय चड आहा जाल्यार भायर मारचें पडटा दिस्तूच थारोवन दवरचें पडटा मागीर मातशें थांब 15 दिसांनी जालें की नोडपाक जाय नोडून 15 दिसांनी जालें काय ना 15 दीस म्हणजे 20 दीस वयता ताका मागीर सारें मारचें पडटा पयलीं मुनाक सारें घालून काडूंक आं रोवता आसतना आनी मागीर नळ्ळ्या उपरांत मारूंक मागीर पुरो दोनाच मारल्यार पुरो जाता आनी कीड बीन पडत जाल्यार ताका मागीर पळोवंक जाय न्हू इतकें काम करूंकूच जाय आनी फाटीं फुडें जायत जाल्यार मागीर तें सारकें न्हू टायमींग त्या म्हयन्यान म्हणल्यार त्याच म्हयन्यान खणोंक जाय तें मागीर 5 फुटां जाल्यार तें मिशीन मागीर धांवता हेणे तुज्या जायना खूब काम आसता तेचें भुरग्यांक सुद्दां भुरग्यांचें तरी बरें म्हणून न्हू शेताक बी थोड्यांक तें आतां शेतूच रोय म्हणटा शेत जावन न्हू तूं आतां पळयना तूं हें पळय उरला मनीसूय कोण येना मनीस येतलो आनी करतलो म्हणून न्हू आपणेन करपाक जाय तें आनी तुका भंय ना मरे सकयल देवानी नुस्तें धर गोय खा जाय तें
राय सद्या आमचे कडेन आजगो कोरगूट आनी गव्हर्मेंटान आतां हें हाडले हायब्रीड वरायटी गोवादान 1, 2, 3, 4 ते हाडले सद्या आमचे कुट्टर हे रोयन आमी ज्योती जया देखून ट्रान्सप्लांट करता खाजनांनी तें कारीफ उदक दिवपा जायना पावसा आनी कारीफ क्रॉप आतां आमी 2 क्रॉप काडटाय सद्या रबी आनी कारीफ आतां पावसान काडटाय तें कारीफ क्रॉप काडटाय थोडे आतां फॉर एग्जाम्पल कुर्तरीन लेक आहा आमी शेत रोयताय तेतून आतां एंड ऑफ सप्टेंबर तें निवताय मागीर ते बंदारा बांदताय आमी बंदारा बांदिल्लो म्हणटच उदक बंद जाता पावसां तें ओपन आसता बंदारा तें उदक रिवर्स वार वयता राडे तें पावसान आतां तें आडायताय सेकेंड क्रॉप काडपाक रबी क्रॉप ते आडी आड पडटा आड म्हणटाय आमी शेजी आड आमचो रोय मिनेजीस म्हणटा आनी रोयल्ल्या त्या फार्मरान 2 lakhs स्क्वेअर मिटर जमीन रोयल्ल्या हितून ताणें जया वेरायटी घायल्या आनी ज्योती हे दोनी वेरायटी रोयल्याय ताणें आनी आजगो कोरगोट म्हणटाय ते आमी राशवाल आनी कांबल्ले लोटले थिंग घाताय आमगे ते मेंबर आमची एक टीम आहा एग्रो-बायोडायवर्सिटी टीम म्हण ते आमी एकलो एक भाशेन कोत्ता थोडे आसा ते आमी रोयताय थोडे आहा ज्योती कर्जत ते घालताय आमी दुसरो दामगा आहा पयली वेरायटी दुसरे आडी आसताय डबल क्रॉप काडपाचे कारीफ आनी रबी क्रॉप तितून आमी पाटणी बी रोयताय हे ट्रेडिशनल वेरायटी आमी रिवायव केला ते करपाक आमकां गोवा स्टेट बायल बोर्डान सपोर्ट केला तेच आमी एक प्रोजेक्ट केल्लो एक 25 क्विंटल हें वयल्लें आमी भात तें तांदूळ करून हाडला कुदा वॅल्यू एडिशन म्हणटाय ताका तें आमी केल्लें आहा
In the most simplified word, Khazans were community systems. They were created by the community and therefore they had to be managed by a community. And if you see, they are not manually operated systems. They are auto managed systems. But they needed a few people to be actually the watch dogs kind of that area, because these were water based system, remember, and water is not an idle element, it is an organic element. It can completely flood you or completely give you food. So they converted themselves into communities at a large scale for larger decisions or bigger decisions, small scale committees for 24 hours watching on these components, because these were components which were completely at risk with water. So this was the model. The smaller committee watched or observed these sluice gates, the bunds, and what was getting inundated, what was being useful. They collected small kinds of taxes between them so that they managed these systems. They had their own offer. It's like Shramadhan that we do. They offered their own services, the manual services for the upkeep of the bund every year. They offered their technique in terms of the carpenters who were there to manage the sluice gate. So these were all a collective. It was never a system where you tendered and you ordered. It was a collective.
There was one treaty between one Afonso Mexia from the Portuguese and the locals in 1526, and the man who signed it is called Afonso Mexia. This is dated 1526, when the Portuguese government with the locals, with the comunidades, came to an agreement how to maintain comunidades. 1526. And this continued up to 61. Comunidades were republics, local republics. Nobody used to interfere. And to regulate that, there was a Código das Comunidades afterwards. Laws, rules, rule book. This was done with comunidades of ilhas, Tissuari. And then it was applied to Bardez and Salcete. And then it was extended to the new conquests. Everything was defined by law. Now you could do nothing. Now comunidad lands that were given on lease for aforamento, there were rules how much square meters would you give to each person. Within how many years he had to develop it. What were the conditions to give it? They could not give to person who had lands, those who deserved it. And then you could not divert the land use for some other thing. Agriculture means agriculture. Now Zuari has got so many acres of hectares of land. Now they are converting it into building this settlement.
Khazan areas are vast and they do not belong particularly to one person as such, because they have been reclaimed, and then what has happened is all the settlers who did that have divided the property as part of say shareholders, and they have to maintain it together because one person cannot just regulate his water flow or something. So there is a committee, there is a association, tenant association, or earlier Komundad structure was there, and Komundad was regulating this with a very nice system where different roles were given to different individuals and groups. Like somebody used to just look after the barns, somebody will look after the sluice gate, some people will look after the fields, and accordingly the work was divided, and there were supporting roles. Later on, government introduced Agricultural Tenancy Act, under which tenant associations are formed, and they have been given this task of maintaining the barn and sluice gate and to ensure fishing and mainly cultivation. So they are regulating it, but due to government inefficiency and corruption, currently this system has crumbled. What you see behind me is actually all these are the most productive and fertile fields of Tiswadi in Karam. We are standing at the meeting point of Nevra Khazans and Karambolim Khazans. This bridge is there which is actually connecting these two things. But if you see now, we used to survive on all the produce of this, but now you only see mangroves because water has been released into these fields and mangroves have grown. It is difficult to even step into these fields. Earlier we used to walk for more than 30 minutes and all and to go to our fields. But now it is impossible. Nobody is cultivating for last 30 years.
हे आतां बुडयता आनी दर्याक पाणी येयलें म्हणटा आनी सगळे आतां एक आनी पयशे खातात सगळे आनी थंय शेतकाराक काबार करता शेतकारांनी जगो नजो सगळे बांद बीन आतां हे गव्हर्मेंट सुद्दां पयसो थोडो म्हणटा आतां गव्हर्मेंटान काम केल्लें अरे काम करता आनी ते धाडे सांडटा तेंचे काडा मरे काडपाक जाय तुमकां कोता हें आतां धाडे आहा पळय कोणाचें शेत जावं हें तपास करपाचें काडपाचें कशें म्हणटा तुमी अरे इतकें शेत करता आनी तुमी पाट सांडटा तें कितें सकयल बांदनाक ते 10-30 हजार लागता मानशेक दुडू लागता तेजे मानशेचे पावता करता पळय ते बांदनाक थोडे मोडटा मागीर बेश्टे काम करचें पडटा मरे.
After the liberation, the local government, local state government created parallel authorities. The revenue department were parallel authorities. The soil conservation department was a parallel authority. So if something goes wrong with this bund right now, the tenant associations have limited power of limited to 5,000 rupees. With 5,000 rupees, hardly anything can happen. The individual service offer which the community had has kind of deteriorated because the systems have deteriorated in terms of their production. So there is a very minimal crop which is happening. We look at land, we look at its value only in terms of construction. So therefore, if it is slightly low, we try to fill it, reclaim it and build buildings over it because our sense of development is a building. So therefore, these bunds become motorable ways, then slowly they get tarred, then the land lying besides it, whether it's a salt pan, whether it is a fish culture pond, whether it's a field, will be looked at by somebody as some resort, some hotel, some building, and especially the areas which are closer to the urban. Urban areas have heavy pressure on the Khazan land because people around think, such a vast amount of land, why is it left open? Let me fill it and let me build buildings because people are quite far away, the settlements are quite far away. Funds which are required prominently, especially in terms of emergency, those are kind of mismanaged or not available. Daily level of maintenance, yearly level of maintenance, long-term measures of maintenance, and these are simple measures. Look after your sluice gate. Who is supposed to look after? If it's the individual, he has a responsibility. If it's community, he has a responsibility. If it's the authority, they have a responsibility. Look after your bund, look after its bridges, look after its elevated level because sea level rise has to be taken care of.
Mainly the coastal areas of Tiswadi. So Tiswadi, the importance of Khazan is too much because most of the land has been reclaimed. Almost 69% of the land available in Tiswadi is Khazan land, and it was supporting so many families. First of all, that was a major, like say, benefit of Khazans. Environmentally, it was protecting us from the floods, like say from the seaside and even from the river side. Whenever there is to be heavy monsoon, Mandovi, Zuari rivers are full. So because of these bunds which are above sea level, slightly above sea level, fields are below sea level, we were protected from the floods. So that was a natural protection. Now that protection is not there. There is a possibility that within some years, since bunds have been damaged and climate change is there, water level is rising, the water will slowly reach up to the village into the doorstep of the villagers.
तुमकां कशें दिसतलें जर बिल्डिंगो हांगा आयल्यो जाल्यार?
आमकां दिसूं नाका रे, म्हणजे दिसतलें गावतलें करूंक शकता न्हू.
तुमकां वायट दिसतलें?
हय तर वायट दिसतालें. ही शेतान आमच्या काडले दिल्ली पयशे घेतले तरी आमकां दुख आसतालें. शेताचे भुडे तुका लागता आनी तांकां तें भरतलें फूड करता तेन्ना मरतले मरचे ते भावचे पळय ते भाशेन करूंक आतां लोक फुडें गेला. लोकांचे कोणाचीच पळयना.